Hello, everyone. I am Lauren Myers. I am the current Executive Director for CPA FMA. Thank you all for joining us for this webinar. As a reminder, today's session is being recorded and attendees are muted for better sound quality. You may type in any questions at the chat at any time. Nic has graciously offered to be interrupted during his talk. If you have something specific that you want to touch on that he's speaking about, please feel free. Put it in the chat or raise your hand and we'll address the question. And at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Nic to you. Nic Rapacz serves as the Vice President of Outsourcing Sales for Forrest Solutions Advisory. As Vice President of Outsourcing Sales, Nic has helped lead client partnerships, creating market differentiating outsourcing programs that help them innovate and optimize their operations. Nic has over 15 years of experience in outsourcing, serving as an expert leading new client strategy, developing customized solutions, and delivering high-impact services for advisory and CPA organizations across the country. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Nic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm going to start bringing you everywhere with me. That was a fabulous introduction. And I want to say thank you to everyone who is joining today. Obviously, taking this time out of your day is precious, especially in the environment that we are in today. But I also want to say thanks to the entire group from the CPA FMA. It's been fantastic working with everyone up to this point, getting ready to have this discussion about workplace experience and the rise of hospitality. And I think it's an extremely relevant topic for the times. Many of you are struggling with return to office, and our hope is that our perspective, my perspective, and Forrest Solutions perspective as an expert in this area can be valuable to you in one way or another. So, as Lauren said, my name is Nic Rapacz, VP of Outsourcing. It's the third time we've said the word outsourcing now, and it's a scary word, so I hope half of you haven't dropped off. But, I've been working across professional services for the last 15-ish years, mainly working with CPA firms and large, AmLaw law firms, but I also have a background in supporting similar efforts for banking clients, consulting firms, and Fortune 500 corporations. So, my expertise has been in resource optimization for the firms that we serve. In some cases, this has really meant helping them optimize on-site support models through things like process improvement, training, and technology. And in others, it's meant building support teams in offsite or even in some cases offshore facilities. Some firms out there think that they are too small to be working with a consultant or a service provider like Forrest Solutions, but as you'll find out today, that's not the case. In many instances, we've placed a single resource within a client's office because we just have capabilities that they don't. So, I've worked with, large scale, small scale, global, and, domestic, or even sometimes just regional clients. And, on the large firm side, I've had the pleasure of traveling across Asia, with a big four CPA firm to help them set up a global network of, 100 plus admin assistants. And on the flip side, I've nearly frozen to death with another client in a place like, North Dakota, setting up a marketing and word processing operation to support, similar size firms. So it's safe to say that, I'm all over the map in terms of the firms that I've supported. And as an organization, we are as well. Services of this variety are really suited for everybody. So, today, obviously, we're not going to be focusing on what firms are doing offsite, but instead, we're going to be focusing on what needs to be accomplished on-site and, the importance of in-office hospitality and what we refer to as workplace experience is very, very relevant today. And it's something that needs attention no matter if you are a single office or if you're a big four firm. So a little bit of background, we manage on-site services and initiatives like this for firms on really both sides of that equation, large and small. And the beauty of this industry and our expertise, optimization and modernizing support services is that more times than not, everybody is really trying to solve the same equation. And the reason I'm able to speak somewhat intelligently about this topic is because I have both partnered with in a previous life and now actually work for an organization called Forrest Solutions. We are a leading provider in what we like to call people-powered solutions to the professional services industry. And as a company, we're uniquely positioned to develop an elevated support services model based on our history in hospitality. Outside of being a niche provider in high level hospitality based services, we are actually one of the largest privately owned staffing companies that works in the industry. So not only do we manage these services on behalf of our clients, but we also fill positions on their behalf with a very large and very impressive group of professional recruiters based in New York. And focusing on the services side of what we do, firms of all sizes come to us when they really want to modernize and optimize the daily interactions that their professionals are having with the office. We place, train, or manage every aspect of workplace services that ultimately enable your fee earners to be as productive as they can be when they visit the office. So, I'm talking about things like high-level meeting support, in-office, concierge services, reception that is more akin to, what you would see in a five-star hotel than you would in a traditional CPA firm. And, outside of high-level hospitality, we do a lot of the blocking and tackling as well. So we manage, print and mailroom operations for dozens of firms across the industry. And in some cases, we even maintain the integrity of their records departments. But as you can already guess, high-level hospitality plays a major role in what we do. And understand that I am not here to pitch you on Forrest Solutions. Today, I'm going to focus on sharing the data and insights that we're seeing across the CPA industry, specifically, what we think is working on the support side of that equation. And my goal is for you to walk away thinking about hospitality in the same way that we do. So, on top of that, hopefully you can walk away with a few tips and tricks as well, in terms of getting people back into the office. So with that being said, we're off. It's funny, this morphed from an agenda all the way to what we'll just calling the slide what we're going to cover today, because frankly, I touch on a lot of this in almost every single slide. But we are going to focus on the state of the workplace and return to office. We're going to focus on what employees across the industry are saying, as well as what some of the big brains across professional services are saying about return to office and the importance of hospitality. We're going to talk about the different return to office models that we are seeing as a provider in this industry and the importance of weaving hospitality into them. And then, fourth, and this is going to happen throughout, case studies of success. I can't help but, weave in, little stories, anecdotal information here and there about, what our clients are seeing in regards to specific problems and, different solutions that we're trying. So, I've been talking for too long already. I feel like I might be losing some of you. So I'll gain your attention back by using some, nasty language in terms of industry standards. And return to office was actually Glassdoor's dirty word of 2022. This was an article put out by Yahoo Finance. And as many of us know already, return to office isn't something that will be accomplished easily. Habits were formed during our mandatory move away from the traditional office. And in many ways, they've become calcified. And at this point, it's going to be really, really hard to put that toothpaste back in the tube. And as you can see in this chart here, return to office wasn't necessarily the phrase with the highest jump, but they're defining it as the dirty word of 2022 because it was the most polarizing. You can see some of these quotes from the article talking about a tug of war between employees wanting to work remotely and people wanting to bring them back into the office, and that's resulted in a 122% jump in the mention of return to office when folks are going online to review their employer. And as a result of economic conditions, many companies are believing that they're getting the power back, in terms of being able to dictate whether people are on site or not. And, we can understand the frustration, by most of the workforce. Studies have shown that there's a measurable importance being placed on the ability to work remotely. Uh, in some cases, they say it's a 7 to 8% raise that they're likening this to, versus returning to a traditional model of being in the office. So repeating that, a majority of employees place such a significance on the ability to work remotely that they would consider leaving up to 8% of their take home on the table to maintain that freedom. And that's not 100% remote. I'm talking about partial work from home, a hybrid model. That's how much they actually value it. And it's really starting to lead us down a road of compromise where most firms are establishing a permanent hybrid model of 2 or 3 days in the office with the rest of that balance being at home. So this is just one set of data. Let's take a look at some more related to occupancy and the state of mind of workers across professional services. So in this slide, we're really going to look at data from two different places. The first graph you see there is from Castle Systems, the company that does scan cards and reporting and security. So Castle comes out with weekly reports. This one was actually released on Monday, and they have office occupancy data broken down by the day, the week, the month, and even further in some cases. And this chart in particular, their barometer, has become famous across the industry. If you pick up the Wall Street Journal in the morning, there's a good chance that you've seen it. And the chart on the bottom is actually from an institute called the Work From Home Institute, and it's a survey that they call SWAA. It's the survey of working arrangements and attitudes. It's namely led by a man named Nicholas Bloom. He's a professor of economics at Stanford University. Nick Bloom spent the last 20 years obsessing over the significance of work from home before work from home was a major thing. And he focused on productivity, behaviors in the workplace, corporate culture, and the mental health of the worker. Long story short, this period of him collecting data is it's the equivalent of buying Bitcoin in 2008. The pandemic made his research extremely valuable, and as a proclaimed nerd about workplace optimization and being able to measure the effects of what we do as professionals in our industry, he is basically our Elvis, which is sad to say. But if you look at the bullets on the top half of this slide, what we're seeing is that occupancy is low and it shows no sign of recovery. So that's this Castle back to work barometer. And I actually grabbed a secondary graph for everyone to look at. And a couple of things that are important to mention. First of all, you can see this graph starts at 100%, and then we can all remember when we fell off the COVID cliff here. It's important to mention that occupancy was never at 100%. Office occupancy prior to COVID was more like 75, 80% in the best case scenarios. We just have 100% here as the baseline. So every number that we look at, we're comparing it to the baseline of 75 to 80%. And you can see in this graph that it's a steady climb. There are noticeable dips here and there. You can, correlate that to holidays and the announcements of different variants and, what's been going on across all of these major metropolitan cities. But the top 10 average is sitting around 50% right now. It's going up, which is a good thing, but I think hybrid is here to stay. And in this graph, you can see that our friends in the Lone Star State, if we took their numbers out and they're hovering in the high 50s to above 60 for Austin, Texas, the top 10 average would drop considerably. And since I have a captive audience, I couldn't help but make a little joke. You can also see the exact moment that I became the world's best adjunct first grade teacher. And you can also see where I probably had my first nervous breakdown of many during that process. I can't see anybody, but I'm going to guess you're laughing. Uh, so, continuing with some of this data, number two, flyover country. It's our time to shine. First of all, I can call it flyover country because I'm based in flyover country. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. But, what we are seeing is that small cities are seeing better numbers as it relates to in-office occupancy. Many of our clients have remote offices in the center of the country that we support, and they've been a lot busier than the cities. And a couple of factors, with this is, number one, a lack of commuting or a much shorter commute. Our company's based out of New York City. I work with, folks who, spend 90 minutes between walking and sitting on a train every single day each way, where in Minneapolis, I live way out in the suburbs and it would take me 20 minutes to get to an office downtown if I had to. It's a big difference. And there's there's a really good reason why we're seeing data in this way. And then number two is the fact that a lot of smaller cities are home to smaller firms that have stricter mandates. Only some of the time. I had to put that in parentheses. It was funny. We spoke on a conference panel back in October, and a COO of 100+ billing professional firm, somebody who's not a client, but a friend in the industry. We had a chance to sit down with her and discuss some of the trends that we're seeing, especially in Manhattan, where this conference was taking place. And when we talked about return to office and the occupancy and everything else, she just kind of snickered and laughed. Return to office for her firm, which is based in Idaho, was immediate. As soon as local, state, and federal governments allowed people to be back on site. She sent out an office-wide memo that said, everyone back in the office now, and everyone came back to the office. I think her reasoning was that she signs the checks. But, as a company, we operate in over 60 cities across the US. And our own internal data is consistent in showing that big cities have struggled the most with occupancies, but small cities or firms with the level of rigidity that I just mentioned are also suffering in a different way, because turnover is up significantly as some employees search for a better work from home environment. And then the third bullet here, middle of the week success, anchor days and little to no enforcement. It should come as no surprise to anybody on this call that Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are leading the way. It's a strategy that many firms have adopted already, using Wednesday as that anchor day. And actually, a large firm that we look after for a lot of the office support services, they've adopted this approach. And like many others, they're close to announcing stricter policies around tracking in-office activity, and much of the industry is following suit. And I'll get into that as well. But the second chart that I'm going to show here, the first bullet actually isn't from the Nick Bloom data that I talked about. It's from Indeed.com, of all places. And I believe it was a poll of 12,000 job seekers, showing the importance of remote work. So of the reasons that they would go out to market looking for a different job, a different career, number one was higher pay. Number two was remote work availability, and number three was career path trajectory. So, money always wins. Everyone's always going to jump for significantly higher pay. But even before career trajectory, I thought it was important to mention that remote work availability took the silver medal in this poll. I think it's eye-opening, and it's been written about quite a bit. And then now looking at the bar graph to the right, Nick Bloom, in this case, I think they surveyed 20,000 plus remote workers on why they visit the office when they do. And it's important to mention that this poll was conducted in today's environment of, return to office, hybrid, quiet quitting, and every other buzzword that we've come up with in the last 3 years. But most of the top answers indicate a preference toward collaboration and face time with their peers. It's the exact thing that we've been lacking, since March 2020. And, for the most part, life has returned to normal, but, the workplace hasn't. Think about it. You go out and gyms, restaurants, coffee shops, they're all packed. Meanwhile, I could probably roller skate through most office buildings in major metropolitan cities. Pre-pandemic, one industry survey stated that over 40% of young professionals like to visit a cafe or a coffee shop each week to focus on their quiet work. So, drawing a conclusion from that and, stepping back a little bit, when the office is everywhere, why aren't we thinking differently about how we draw people back? From both a real estate perspective and a hospitality perspective, why aren't we designing the office to be more like the places that professionals want to be? Because, at the end of the day, the role of the office has changed. So it's funny, we collaborated with a CPA client firm of ours, and a few years ago, this list used to be referred to as a wish list. And now a lot of our clients across professional services think that these items are table stakes, and they're the biggest demands of what workers want to see in the modern office. So number one on that list was elevated hospitality. They want to be looked after. Nobody wants to visit the office just to have the feeling that they're less prepared or less taken care of than they would have been if they had just stayed at home. It's common sense. You go to the office, you expect a certain level of support and service. Otherwise, why wouldn't you just stay back? Number two was, parking and transport, for obvious reasons, when we were talking about commutes earlier. And, in some cases, our larger clients are starting to build satellite offices along, train lines in places like Connecticut, moving out to the suburbs and, opening up smaller locations so it's easier for people to get to, because everyone's trying to, drive collaboration and culture. Third was, seamless technology. In this case, that means collaboration tools and cloud tech. All of those things are in a very good place now, and they're improving. Like, imagine if we would have gone through this pandemic in the early 2000s or even the 2010s. Everybody would be back in the office already, because we just didn't have fast enough internet. We didn't have cloud sharing. We didn't have Zoom. We wouldn't have been able to do it. So it's funny because one of our clients related to technology, they have a strict requirement that all meeting spaces, it's a big firm, all meeting spaces across their locations in the US, and there's dozens of them, they need to be consistent. So it's a best practice for our employees, as it is with most of our clients already, to document what each location needs to look like. And we have like account manuals printed and bound, ready to go in every site. And the reason for this is because if somebody is visiting an office from another location, or there's somebody who usually works at home, or if they're visiting the office for the first time, the firm, from a culture standpoint, can't afford for them to have a bad experience. They understand that when people come into the office, they need to be looked after. And if they're not going to come back, or it's going to be their preference to not come back. So, in this instance, somebody from the Forrest team is always following a group out of a meeting room, ensuring that every single space is consistent, every cable is curled up in a perfect way, every drawer is open at a certain length. It really becomes an exercise in perfection when you are trying to coax people back. So continuing with this, booking, hoteling is the future of all office space. And if you haven't gone down this route, you definitely should be exploring it, along with what the industry is now calling residential layouts. Having couches, splitting or combining residential and commercial, furniture. Whenever I hear that term, I always, think of an airport lounge, essentially how those are set up. That's what most modern offices need to look like today. If you can do it, outside space and natural light. I am in Minnesota. It is early February, so nobody is breathing fresh air. quiet spaces for focus and thinking. Some of our clients are even going as far as having soundproof booths in their offices. So folks are able to, step away and take a phone call or do a Zoom meeting uninterrupted. These are all things that, offices are bringing to light. And then of course, barista level coffee that has to make the list at some point or another. Everybody needs it. So, you know, when you put this wish list into practice, the role of the office completely changes. And you know, this slide, first of all, I'll say I'm an honest thief. The tagline that I ended up putting on the slide yesterday says on-site is the new off-site. We actually took that from a different client, another CPA client. It's a callback to the days of when we used to purposefully schedule an offsite for collaboration purposes. It's funny how the office has kind of become the new version of that. And, we just had to share the phrase, excuse me. And, but this slide in general is a very broad brush because in our experience, the CPA industry was already ahead of many other professional services firms, in terms of allowing a certain level of remote work, focusing on collaboration, instituting hoteling, et cetera, et cetera. But, it's a good visual on, for the most part, how we've been flipped on our heads. Pre-pandemic, it was all about focused work. The office was a place that you went to, do emails, data entry. It was a place you were expected to be. And collaboration was just a sub feature. Post-pandemic, it's something that we crave. We go to the office to connect with our peers. And now the trick is, how do we make the office more palatable? And a good habit that came from this industry shift is how we've all just now learned, especially with hybrid schedules, how to compartmentalize, all of our busy work into those work from home days. Emails, data entry, research, things that don't require a shower first thing in the morning followed by an hour commute into the city. We're saving a lot of that collaboration for when we are finally on site. And that's what a lot of firms are having us focus on. So this slide is just a glimpse at, what is the market telling us? So I just compiled a number of recent articles talking about, what is the state of the marketplace? What are we going to expect in 2023? So the first one is from a group called The Ascent. And, as of the writing of this article, it was reported that 66% of companies out there require some time back in the office. And starting in 2023, or at least in Q1, the number is expected to be 90%. So what that is telling us is that most of the market has already done their homework. They know the direction they want to go with what hybrid work is going to look like going forward, and they're going to start requiring it. The second article I already mentioned, it's just too funny not to show it again, how return to office was the dirty word of 2022. But what the author went on to report was that hybrid is becoming a compromise, and that companies are slowly trying to take back some of that control while using economic uncertainty as the driver of it. So it used to be, come into the office 2 days a week. Now it's going to be 3. Some companies are 4, which I'll get to as well. The next one was from CNBC, reporting more of the same, but also highlighting the fact that workers, are in a game of chicken with their employers. The high point of remote job applications or offerings in 2020 has dropped by nearly 40%, while the number of job seekers looking for remote work has increased in some ways, and for the most part has stayed flat. So people have their preference. They're making their preference known in the marketplace. And as a result, some organizations are having to settle with a certain level of talent that is okay with coming into the office. And that is changing culture across the industry. And the last article that I had to share, Disney. So this announcement came out, I believe, early January. January 9th, it actually says on there. And I believe that it's going to have the largest impact on return to office in coming months. So Bob Iger, arguably one of the most well-known CEOs across American business, he's come in to save the day at Disney by returning to his post. And quite literally, one of the first things that he did was put out a memo saying, back to the office 4 days a week, no matter what. Whether it is a success or not, many organizations are going to point their finger at this decision as justification for stricter return to office policies. And a lot of talking heads out there are predicting that it'll eventually be scaled back because he's going to meet a lot of resistance. But Disney's not one to be moved by force. So now we know what organizations want. What are some of the common return to office models? And this is based on our experience. I mean, everybody on this call knows about each of these three models, but what we're seeing across professional services is not everyone is focusing on 100% in office or 100% fully remote. It's a combination of hybrid and hybrid and in office support. So hybrid or mandated days is the ultimate gray area, and I'm going to get to that. But with the first two strategies, 100% in, it's what we've seen a number of our financial services clients do. In banking, it is something that is a little more common, and those clients, especially ones that we have supported and still support across the industry, they command a much higher level of on-site hospitality than somebody who doesn't require 100% in-office work. Some law firms, small practice law firms do this, and very few CPA firms in our experience. Fully remote, namely our tech clients, and actually one of our big four clients that we support went with this approach, or at least gave the option for being fully remote, paired with a hybrid model. It's rare that a company outside of tech would go fully remote, especially in professional services, but some have given that option to opt out. And it comes with drawbacks because early on in the pandemic, people were able to game the system a little bit, drawing a Los Angeles, California wage while living on their plot of land out in Montana. But firms are implementing stricter policies to reduce the likelihood of relocation, and it didn't take long for them to narrow down those offenders. But going on to hybrid models, it's by far the most popular, and it's in my very uncontroversial opinion, it's the future of all in-office work. But it's also the ultimate gray area. There's no strict definition of what it means. It's completely arbitrary and ambiguous, and whether it's across industries, companies, geographies, or even with local managers, everyone has a different definition of it. And in most cases, the policy exists in a vacuum with no actual enforcement for those breaking it. Up to today, it's probably been for the best, but many of our clients, out of the dozens that we serve across professional services, are beginning to tighten the grip a little bit, leading into the second quarter. And the most consistent trend that we've seen, or that has been communicated to us anyways, is that firm management is going to begin tying attendance to performance reviews, and in some cases bonus eligibility, essentially adding a new column to performance reviews that is squarely focused on advancing the culture of the firm. Perfect wording for this. And from a management standpoint, hybrid really doesn't work without tight coordination. There's been extensive research on the topic dating back to before COVID that proves the point. And if teams and managers are out of sync on what the expectation is, excuse me, for days in the office, you end up with people potentially scheduling their time on a Monday after a holiday or on a Friday when nobody else is there and the office is virtually empty. In scenarios like that, the intended result of building culture and having in-office collaboration is lost because essentially they're working in a ghost town. So in addition, if you have business leaders and managers who are out of sync with the members of their individual teams, you also end up with certain employees getting more time in the sun with members of senior management. So it's important to be in sync there as well. And, as a group of professional office leaders, I don't have to tell you how quickly paranoia can spread through the ranks. But, what I'm getting at is, we need to focus on a return to office model that's preferred by employees, which in most cases is hybrid. Um, and it also needs to have the comforts and the high levels of service that are required to make that compromise palatable, at least for a majority of the workforce. And in our view, the right mantra is, let's not force people back into the office. Let's earn those professionals back to the office. So we don't want to start this, back to office reboot on the wrong foot. And that's where the idea of hospitality comes in. We need to compete with work from home by elevating the profile of the office. And, unfortunately, it requires more than just putting out free lunch. So, what is the role of hospitality in return to office? Before we get too deep into it, um, we need to separate the terms, service from hospitality. So a service is something that's done to us. Hospitality is how it makes you feel. It's what, keeps you coming back. And if you, look at the dictionary definition that I have on the screen here, it's the friendly and generous reception and entertainment of guests, visitors, or strangers. If you didn't already know that, you also didn't know that Scotland is apparently renowned for its hospitality. That's something that I didn't know leading into this, but I'll never forget it now. But with this definition, I don't want to speak in riddles here, but good hospitality is one of those things that's it's difficult to perfectly describe, but you definitely know when you've received good hospitality. Getting reassuring answers, from support staff, people looking you in the eye, making good eye contact, and essentially having a warm smile and a greeting when you enter the office for the first time. It really is the little things that make the biggest difference when it comes to supporting our professionals in the office. And the importance of hospitality in the workplace, in our opinion, is equal to the importance of hospitality to the hotel industry. Every minute you spend on site with a hotel is in their best interests. It's building their brand as well, but you order a meal in their restaurant, you secure show tickets through their concierge who is somehow connected to everybody in the industry. You have a coffee or a drink at their bar. And with everything you do in a hotel, their profitability in you as a consumer goes up. Having those amenities make a difference, and it builds the brand while also improving the business. And when your firm treats returning professionals as valued guests in a similar fashion, the return on investment from your professionals goes up in the same way. It means an enhanced allegiance to the firm, increased collaboration for people who would otherwise, never meet in a virtual environment because they have no reason to. The building of culture and belonging may also someday mean the difference of someone not accepting an offer from your competitor down the street because they feel a connection to the firm. They know that they're not going to get treated this way anywhere else that doesn't put the same time, care, and energy into hospitality. But more than anything, a busy office gives the younger generation of workers and professionals the mentoring that all of us received at one point. I don't know who said it first, but I heard it somewhere months ago that if you want a job, you can work virtually, but if you want a career, you better get in the office. And it's funny because a firm that we support in the South US brought our team from Forrest in a few months ago to have a discussion about hospitality. At the onset of the pandemic, a significant number of their office services staff were furloughed. And with low occupancy rates at the beginning of return to office, even lower than the averages that we saw earlier, their pre-pandemic mindset kind of told them not to replace those headcount. So former support staff were siloed. Nobody was cross-trained in any of, meeting support services or reception or anything like that. So a lot of those posts were just vacated. And unless you were a dedicated admin or, involved in reception in some way or another, you really didn't have an incentive or a mandate to receive hospitality training until it ended up hurting the firm a little bit. So regionally, they had a reputation or have a reputation of being one of the best employers out there. Their pay is the highest. They have the most impressive client base. Their internship program is sought after by all the local universities. But since the pandemic, it's the first time in the firm's history that they've begun to lose headcount on the junior associate side of the business. And it's just because these people were no longer receiving the attention that they crave at the firm. And all of the hard work that was spent building that reputation as a destination for talent, it was quickly washed away due to that lack of mentorship. And it was especially ironic, and we're seeing it more and more across the industry, that the firm mandated a number of days in the office, and they've been spending a considerable amount of money on happy hours, free breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and anything else they can think of, cookies and treats and everything. However, the partners, the people who voted to spend this money to try to lure people back into the office, they weren't even coming in. Yeah, free coffee. I've got an espresso machine in my kitchen. Quiet space in the office. I've done well for myself. I have a personal library and a study at my house. They don't care about Taco Tuesday. The best Mexican joint in town can, DoorDash in 20 minutes. They'll have a full meal. So top to bottom, firm leadership knew that they wanted to compete with the convenience of work from home, and they had to up the level of hospitality that lured every level of employee back to the office, especially because they had just signed a lease on some very nice new real estate in preparation for a move. They wanted to make sure that the office was full when they opened their new space. So they were actually referred to Forrest by one of our banking clients, and they asked for our take on hospitality. And our take on hospitality is something that we call workplace experience. And we are really the only ones doing it on this level in the marketplace. So in short, what is workplace experience? It is a methodology to providing essential workplace support with the mentality of white glove service. Before we start talking about the model and how we advise clients on the importance, ask yourself this question. If you're visiting, if money wasn't an object and you were visiting a new city for the first time and you wanted to see the sights, would you pick, like a Ritz-Carlton, a brand renowned for customer service, hospitality, elegance, concierge support, or would you just go it alone and rent an Airbnb and be responsible for the coordination of your trip, cleanup, navigation, research, figuring out what the Wi-Fi is, where the restaurants are, et cetera, et cetera. It's obviously a flawed argument because the Ritz is a lot more expensive than just grabbing a house somewhere. But I would argue that hospitality, it doesn't carry a price tag. We already covered that. It's a mindset. And at the end of the day, a positive customer experience is the main goal. So workplace experience, or WPX as we call it, it's our methodology. It's our training program. It is our hiring guide. And it's a culture spark that we believe is the future of providing, forward-thinking firms with the ability to compete with work from home. So we actually, we certify our support staff in WPX, and upon completion, they wear a pin that looks just like this logo up here on their collar. And there's three main pillars to workplace experience. Not all of these, not every bullet is required in every instance of us partnering with one of our client firms, but they're all available. So like, if you look at it, it's meet and greet, guest transition, and destination services. We will handle every aspect of these three pillars. In one of our higher end clients, client sites, we are responsible for meeting guests of the firm, high level VIPs, clients, people interviewing for a new position. We meet them street side. We bring them in. We, in well, with verification, we skip through security. We take them up to a floor that is designed specifically to attract new talent. We give them the full hospitality experience. For guest transition, most of our client firms and most of you out there probably do some version of hot desking or hoteling. I think I mentioned earlier that you should if you haven't yet. We manage that process end to end. In many cases, clients are asking us to implement it for them. We work with technology partners across the industry. One actually who did a webinar for the same organization is a partner of ours in the industry. And we take care of all of the destination services as well. So workplace concierge, AV support, community spaces, and food and bev. Essentially, like, we are on site to make sure your professionals are looked after, and that is the essence of workplace experience. um, you know a lot of you probably hear that and say, like, there's no way I could support that at my firm. It's not something that we could do on a day-to-day basis. And you're probably right, and a lot of our clients are of the same opinion. So we've staffing schedules for a lot of our clients where if they have anchor days of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or days where we are seeing a higher occupancy rate, we focus their workplace experience associates on those days, so you can see different shift patterns to support it. 4 days a week at 10 hours a day, or 3 days a week at 12 hours per day. It's something that has been a big success for us and for our clients. But in terms of where we find our people, we are hiring from hospitality. You don't necessarily need any specific background to be able to provide these services on site. Obviously, for some of the blocking and tackling services that we provide, like high-end mail support and copy center, et cetera, we hire experts. But for client-facing roles, we are hiring from the Ritz-Carlton, JW Marriott, the Peninsula, has been a good feeder system for us. And in many cases, employees in the hospitality industry are more than happy to transition over to professional services because the schedule is much better. The pay is very similar, and it's a more prestigious role. People enjoy working in an office environment more than they do, being in a hotel environment. So we're seeing a lot of success there, and you can see that we're getting people from hotel industry, the restaurant industry, and obviously folks who've worked in corporate settings. So I am going to leave you with this because we are almost out of time and I'm almost out of content. But here are some of the tips and tricks that you can already implement within your own environments. Whether you work with a provider like Forrest Solutions or anyone else, or if you want to do it on your own from scratch. But a lot of there's 6 buckets here. You can mix and match as much as you would like, but these will have an immediate impact similar to what I have described up to this point. Looking at food service and running, making sure that you have healthy options for people, making sure that upon arrival to the office, especially if it's a scheduled arrival, you can take somebody's food order. These are things that we manage for our clients. You can definitely do it internally as well. Thinking about loyalty cards and rewarding people for showing up. In a hoteling situation, we make sure that they get early access to the rooms or the desks that they want. We make sure that they're sitting by colleagues that they want to interact with when they're in the office. We make sure they're hooked up with a good parking spot. I mean, that in and of itself is enough of a reason to get to the office. And like I mentioned before, a lot of firms are tying it to annual bonuses now. So look for more thought leadership in the industry about that. I'm sure it'll be coming. Petty cash, it's obviously something that needs to be enforced, but we like to have that available in a lot of the sites that we manage, just so we can accurately anticipate needs. If somebody spills on their shirt 5 minutes before a webinar like this, we can go out and get them a new one. We can, supply somebody with an umbrella. If a client is coming on site and we realize that they are allergic to half of the things that we are serving, we can have somebody run out and take care of it. Anticipating those needs is paramount to success in what is now the future of the workplace. So going forward, feel free to reach out. Our team would be happy to work with you or to do an assessment of, what your operations look like today, as you ramp up the next phase of, what your firm is going to become. All you have to do is, find me and ask. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can reach out, via our website. But with that, I'm happy to field any questions if they came in through the chat. Otherwise, I would just like to say thank you again. Something just popped up in front of my screen, an evaluation. But it's been a pleasure connecting with all of you for the first time. So Lauren, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you so much, Nick. We really appreciate it. We'd like to thank you and Forrest Solutions for your presentation. Lots of great information on how to improve the workplace experience. I'd also like to thank everyone else for participating and spending part of your day with us, CPA FMA. All attendees will receive an email within the next 24 hours with your CPE certificate. And this presentation has also been recorded. You'll receive a copy of that as well early next week. If there's nothing else, I guess we can conclude. Do we have any questions? Nope, I don't see anything in the chat box or Q&A. So thank you all and enjoy the rest of your day. Oh, we have one question. Donna, let me see if I can get you here. I do not see a raised hand now. No, I'm so sorry. Do you want to put your question in the chat box? All right, well, Donna, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to info@cpafma.org, and I will forward Nick's contact information to you as well. All right.
All right. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks.